Now I want to go further. We're going to go after. We're going to pass Friday the 13th, Shabbos the 14th, and we'll go to Sunday the 15th of Sivan. Now Sunday the 15th of Sivan is a special day on the Chabad calendar. You might want to say it's the most ironic special day on the Chabad calendar. And that is because the 15th of Sivan is the day that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the father-in-law of the Rebbe, was arrested in Soviet Russia. Now, I said it's an ironic day because you might ask, what's so special about the Rebbe being arrested? Why would we consider that a special day? Doesn't sound like a happy thing. Now, the truth is, obviously, it wasn't a happy event. It was a very sad event. And as we will see, not only from what we will learn today, but in future classes as well, that it was actually a very dangerous time for Judaism in general, for the Rebbe in particular. In fact, the Soviets wanted to sentence the previous Rebbe for a death penalty. And miraculously, he was liberated. Once again, we'll get to that later. Right now, today, we're focusing on the arrest of the previous Rebbe. But nevertheless, the previous Rebbe's son-in-law, our Rebbe, would focus on this day and say that now in hindsight, when we look back at this day, we see this day actually as the beginning of tremendous good. Because ultimately, after the liberation of the previous Rebbe, he not only continued his activities from before, but advanced them to a much greater degree. And obviously later, the previous Rebbe moved to the United States and continued his work and spread his work even more. So the Rebbe would refer to this day as the planting for the growth that was later. Just like you put a seed in the ground, and obviously the seed is hidden, and it doesn't look so pretty for the seed, and the seed disintegrates. Nevertheless, that's the beginning of the growth. The day of the 15th of Sivan, when the previous Rebbe was arrested, is seen in the same way, as the beginning of the growth that would come later. Now, I want to focus on the event of the arrest of the previous Rebbe, just a few points. So the previous Rebbe himself actually wrote a diary, a very detailed diary of his arrest. And he goes through all the details of what happened that night when he was arrested on the 15th of Sivan in 1927. And the previous Rebbe shares with us a few things. But before I go into that, I want to address another topic, which is what led to the arrest. So there are a few things that led to the arrest of the previous Rebbe. Generally speaking, it could all be put under the category of counter-revolutionary activities, anti-communist activities, but it boils down to this. Several months earlier, the previous Rebbe held a farbrengen, a public Hasidic gathering in Moscow. This was Purim Katan. That's the first Adar of that year, 1927, where he shared a Hasidic discourse, a mimer, very, very passionate about the need to ensure the future of Jewish education. And he even called out some people who were there at the gathering by name and told them that they must take their children out of the required public school system, which was mandated by the Soviets, and put them into Jewish schools, despite the fact that they would obviously be putting themselves and their children at risk by doing so. And during that farbrengen, it is well known that there were many Russian spies. And that's one item that led to the arrest. Another element of the arrest of the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, is the fact that during that time, the communists were planning a large convention of rabbis. And they weren't upfront about this, but their intention was that they should get a group of rabbis. Maybe a minority would not agree with their stance, but enough rabbis that would either be threatened or would willingly join their cause. And then they would sort of have a rubber stamp by so many leading rabbis or the majority of the rabbis of that conference that would support their view, and Jews throughout Soviet Russia would follow along with their edicts and with their mandates. The previous Rebbe went out on a full sort of war against it, and making sure that rabbis should not agree to this gathering and to this conference. And in fact, in his diary, right before speaking about the arrest, he speaks about his efforts in blocking this conference from happening and blocking certain rabbis from participating and agreeing to this conference. So the previous Rebbe was in his home when he was arrested in the city of Leningrad. And the previous Rebbe, amongst the things that he tells us are as follows. I want to go through some of the points. He describes his own mood and how calm he felt. In fact, at one point, he was so calm that the officers that came to arrest him and to search his apartment started yelling at him, and they told him, "It is obvious to us that you are not aware of our methods of how we get people to talk and to open up and to share with us things that they never wanted to share." And this is actually a quote from what the previous Rebbe told him. He said, "I'm not fully aware of your methods, that's true, and I have no desire to know them." That's just one quote of his during that search. In fact, just to add a little point, when they came to arrest him, the previous Rebbe was in the middle of eating dinner, and they barged into the apartment, and the previous Rebbe turned to them and said, "Why would you barge into someone's apartment in the middle of eating?" As if he's speaking to people, rational people, and he's telling them, that's not the way you treat someone. And they were actually very taken aback by his calm demeanor and how he writes, he made a strong decision and a resolution that he would not cave to them at all. Meaning caving not only that he wouldn't do what they want, but he wouldn't show them any respect. And he managed that throughout the time of his imprisonment until he was freed on the 12th of Tammuz, which we'll get to on another day. Now, during the search of the previous Rebbe's apartment, the previous Rebbe writes in his diary that his 3 daughters, one of which was Rebbe Chaim Mushka, the wife of the Rebbe, there's 3 daughters were there, and when the Russian guards, the Soviet guards, entered their room, they wanted the previous Rebbe's daughters to sort of spill the beans and say things about their father and how their father is going against the government. So they asked the girls, the 3 girls, which party in Russia do you belong to? Which political party? To which they answered, "We are not members of any party. We are members of our father's party. The party of Yiddishkeit, the party of Judaism, the pride of," this is the words they use, "the age-old Jewish traditions." Something which the previous Rebbe writes in his diary, "I took great pride in hearing their responses." A very sad part, in addition to the arrest, was the fact that some of the members of the GPU, the secret police at the time, were actually from Hasidic families. In other words, their father or their grandfather was actually a Chassid, a Chabad Chassid, of either the previous Rebbe's father, the previous Rebbe's grandfather, the Rebbe Rashab, the Rebbe Maharash, which made it even more hurtful for the previous Rebbe to go through such suffering in the hands of people who were actually, members of the tribe, of the Hasidic tribe, or children of members. And at one point, when he was taken away from his apartment, one of the officers, a man by the name of Nachman's son, who was the son, he writes, the son of a Chabad Chassid, of a Lubavitcher Chassid. So he told the previous Rebbe, "Just like my grandfather would carry the bags of your grandfather, I want to carry your bags." And the previous Rebbe said, "Yeah, but there was a big difference. Your grandfather took my grandfather's bags to the place where my grandfather wanted to go. you want to take my bags to the place where you want to take me, and that I will not allow. And he did not allow Nachmanson to carry his bags, and instead he carried them himself. Now, once again, this day is seen by the Rebbe to be the beginning of the revolution that came after, the Hasidic revolution that came after, the Hasidic revolution in America that came after. So, although at the time it was obviously a sad day, it's a sad event, nevertheless, it was the seeds that were being planted at that time that we celebrate every year on the 15th of Sivan. Thank you very much for joining, and I hope you join again for the next class.